I'm excited to share a new story with you. And then the darkness of the night brought an intense silence in the room. The air inside was heavy but peaceful. I heard the rhythmic breathing of the man lying next to me. And there was a strange restlessness within me. There was a subtle pressure in my C*******T, an inexplicable anxiety in my mind. I felt the presence of Duke instinctive. Then the sound started, a low, barely audible growl. I opened my eyes and turned to the other side of the bed. My boyfriend Charlie lay in a deep sleep. His left shoulder was bare, and his breathing was quiet and rhythmic. But it was not him that my gaze was on. It was the door, then the growl again. I threw back my head and looked into the darkness. First silence. Then the growl once more, deep metallic rasp coupled with the sound of scraping, impatient. My eyes gradually got used to the dark, and I felt the shadow there under the door. Duke, he was standing at the door. Something in me tightened. He had never done this. Duke had been my cute dog all these years. Not once had he aggressively acted for no reason. But now he was standing with his giant body before the door, blocking my path. I couldn't see his eyes, but I could feel them. He was staring at me. Duke. I whispered. He didn't answer. Then he growled again, low, threatening, like a warning from the depths. Charlie stirred beside me, but didn't wake up. I was already wide awake, both mentally and physically, clearing my throat. I got out of bed, my bare feet touching the wooden floor. The faint light filtering into the room cast my shadow on the wall. I took a few steps toward the door. The growling stopped, but the snarling continued. Duke was waiting for me. A disconcerting feeling gripped me. As I reached for the doorknob, I realized I was sweating. I took a deep breath and cracked open the door. Duke's massive form emerged in front of me. His eyes were gleaming. He wasn't looking at me, but at the man inside. At Jonathan's sleeping body. He didn't rush in immediately, but he tried to sniff by lifting his front paws. He stuck his nose through the open door, inhaling. Then suddenly he bared his teeth. Sharp, threatening. I stepped back. Duke. Stop. I whispered, but he didn't even twitch his ears. Charlie's presence was bothering him. That much was clear. But why he was just a human wasn't he? As Duke growls echoed through the room, a strange fear gripped me. He had never done anything like this before. He wasn't aggressive but determined. His eyes were fixed on Charlie, almost piercing through him. Duke, enough. I whispered, but he ignored me. He grabbed the sheet with his teeth and started pulling it forcefully. Charlie stirred, but didn't wake up. I held my breath, trying to understand what Duke was trying to do. Cut it out. I tried to pull him back with his hands, but he was strong. He pressed the bed with his whole body and tried to tear the sheet. At that time, a strange feeling woke up in me. For a few seconds I realized that Duke was really trying to warn me about something, and then he started the claws. Duke was finding claw on the bedding. His eyes shone with enthusiasm, almost as he had caught some victims. Charlie said, "What is this cute dog doing?" but didn't even open their eyes. But I saw what Duke tried to reveal. There was something there with trembling hands. I tried to pull my cute dog away, but it was stubborn. Very stubborn. Then came a voice, a tick. Some fell on the floor, cold and metal. When I looked down I felt a deep tremor inside. In slightly light a clock glowed. I nipped. Hopefully I looked at things, but no, it was real. A name repeated in my mind. William. I tilted down and picked up the clock. It was cold, a little rusty, but known. Very familiar. Something I have known and recognized for years. But the real shock came when I overturned. It was a name engraved inside, William Blackwood. My blood was cold. My hand trembled, the weight of the number of my fingers. This cannot happen. It should not happen. Charlie's voice suddenly became clear. What's wrong? Why are you looking at this? I couldn't answer him. My throat was tight. My heart struck so fast I felt it would jump from my C*******T. This clock. It was William, and William disappeared months ago. The clock in my hand looked like a piece of snow in my palms. William's watch. I discovered letters engraved with my trembling fingers. William Blackwood, how can this happen here? My breath dragged. The wind is burning. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would burst out of my C******T. This watch, it's William's. I whispered, my voice barely audible. Charlie's eyebrows furrowed. He slowly sat up and moved closer to me, his eyes first on the watch, then on my face. What he asked. At that moment I noticed his face had turned pale too. What is this doing here? He muttered, his eyes quickly flicked to the watch. Then back to me. I have no idea, Isabella, really. But a tiny shadow in his eyes sparked a terrible suspicion. Should I believe him? Duke's growl intensified. I stepped back a few paces, my eyes never leaving Charlie. But Duke. He didn't budge. His fur was standing on end, muscles tensed, eyes locked on Charlie, and then I noticed something. Duke wasn't looking at him the way he used to. He had never barked at him, or reacted much to him before. But now his eyes were like a hunter. Charlie opened his mouth, but no words came out. He swallowed, teased his lips, but his voice got stuck in his neck. He felt as if he was caught. Red hand. I took a step, then another. Where did you get this? My voice was flat and firm. Isabella. I don't know. Charlie raised his voice but was nervous in it. I have nothing to do with this. You know, William has been missing for months. Maybe it has fall here. It was ridiculous. I knew that he was lying because his eyes rapidly darted from one side, as if someone was looking for a run. But Duke was not buying lies. A low rumbling growl increased from his throat. The moment I heard that voice, my hair was standing at the end. Duke, Charlie will not let another step closer. Then Charlie left. He raised his hand, perhaps to defend himself, maybe to reach me. But Duke did not allow it. Everything stopped. Duke lunged. He proceeded with his front claws, a knee threatening to echo through the room. Charlie fronds. Terrorist hands were raised in surrender. Isabella, stop it. But I did not know what Duke saw. Was William here? Or was there some secret? Charlie hidden. The wind felt cold in my lungs. My hands were shaking. But the clock in my palm looked more heavy, like a Samahi. The wind was cold when I opened my eyes in the morning hours. An indescribable restlessness filled me. There was a strange pressure in my C*******T, as if someone is watching me in my sleep. I kept staring on the roof, taking deep breaths for a few seconds, trying to create myself. My head was moving, but then I realized Duke was not here. Usually he used to sleep through the bedroom door in the morning. His calm breath, even a minor voice of his nails, focused on one spot. My heart sank. I called out to him, but he didn't respond. There was something I needed to see quickly. Throwing on some clothes, I rushed outside. I felt the dampness of the grass and the morning chill on my skin, but neither could overpower the growing fear inside me. I quickened my pace, and as I approached, my heart began to race faster. Duke was stubbornly digging at the same spot, his front paws tearing at the earth, a soft growl escaping him. I knelt beside him, placing my trembling hands on his head. Duke, what are you doing? I whispered. The cute dog paused for a moment, looking up at me with deep, dark, warning eyes. It was a look I had never seen before. This was a look that was trying to tell me something. A voice inside me told me to stay away, but another whispered that I had to keep going for a few seconds. I stared at the ground. What could be there? Then I made up my mind. I needed to get a shovel. Standing up, I rushed to the kitchen. My hands were shaking as I opened the door and grabbed the shovel leaning against the cabinet. I hurried back to the garden. Duke hadn't moved an inch, sitting next to him. I plunged the shovel into the hard earth with the first strike. The unease inside me grew even stronger. This soil. It was loose, as if this spot had been dug up before, and then filled back in. Something was buried here. Thoughts screamed in my mind, but my hands kept digging. 1 shovelful, 3 shovelfuls, 3 shovelfuls. As the earth slowly opened, the growing fear inside me became unbearable. And then I saw something. At first it looked like a piece of fabric, blackened and dirty wet. But then as my fingers touched it, I realized it wasn't fabric, it was skin. I recoiled. The air in my lungs felt like poison. My hands trembled, but I couldn't stop myself from looking. Duke slowly lowered his head into the hole and sniffed the earth, then looked at me, and I saw the certainty in his eyes. I had to keep going. I swallowed hard, plunging the shovel back into the ground. I started digging faster. My hands were now caked with dirt, but I didn't care, and as I dug, something else emerged, a hand rotting, decayed with broken fingernails. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. I couldn't breathe. I recoiled, shaking as I fell back onto the dirt. But the real shock came when I recognized the hand. This hand belonged to William, my husband's hand. The air I drew into my lungs burned my throat. I clamped my hands over my mouth, biting down to keep from screaming. But one thought echoed in my mind. How did William end up here? Who buried him? And most terrifying of all, who else knew he was here? I collapsed onto my knees trying to catch my breath, but it didn't seem to help. The waves of fright washing over me bathed my hands in sweat, seeping into the earth and deepening the dark of night. Everything seemed like a dream, yet so real that it felt much more like a nightmare. I closed my eyes and took deep breaths, but drawing air into the lungs only made things more uneasy. Indeed, it was William. Yes, he was here. He was dead. Though his body buried beneath this soil was nothing more than a future that belonged not to me. It became a relic of my past life, some lost but now resurrected. Whatever happened now, it was the end. Nothing ever would be. There was a rotting hand, broken pieces of bones and painful realities. Besides watching the state of the rotting body, I was also watching the state of my own decay. Duke was the one to expose all the truths that had been buried deeply here with his animal instinct. He knew he was present here. But for me, how have I missed this? Why haven't I been noticing all this? While the pressure upon me kept looming down and smashing everything beneath it, the stillness outside suddenly became even more oppressive. All that could be heard was Duke's unearthly gaze and his deep breaths. What did Duke know? This question echoed in my head. There was an answer, but I both wanted to find it and wanted to run from it. But there was nowhere to run. Dig. This hole just meant recognizing their past, that it was now a closed book. The fear was not just from the earth, but facing the truth. My eyes quickly returned to the hole. I focused on the shadow behind Duke. At that moment, I heard the echo of a rustling sound in my mind. A voice came from behind me. A shadow emerged, just a figure, a lonely trace in the darkness. From moments ago, I slowly turned around, and without taking my eyes off him, stepped back. At that moment, I felt something break inside me. My lover wasn't far away. He was right in front of me. The expression on his face told me how hard the truth was. His eyes were filled with a faint fear and guilt. He knew too. He knew exactly what all of this meant. This must be a mistake, he whispered. But his voice trembled so much that I felt something shatter inside me. The truth was so complex that I had already realized it. There were feelings in my own heart that I didn't want to face. But one thing was clear. I knew this was too real to be a mistake. My lover couldn't even remember his own name. His eyes looked at me as if from a great distance, like a stranger. I was caught in a lie, and no matter how much I ran, I had to face it. I was breathing fast, my eyes fixed on him. He stepped back a little more, but the trembling in his steps had already widened the distance between us. This distance wasn't just physical. In that moment I sensed how far away that man had actually become. Duke, on the other hand, had focused his sight directly on that person. Each movement of the creature communicated to us. Duke had been standing directly in front of us, and yet had remained calm and composed regardless of the seas the river sent forward. Is everything meaningful now, including this fear that speaks of some internal discovery? I refocused my attention on the man. The anger in my eyes expressed more than anything could. How long had I turned the blind eye to this? I took a step back. The look my lover had just given me was unlike any other. The truths were out in the open. Duke bristled and bared his teeth. At that moment, he was as smart as he was powerful. Every gesture was directed against the man I wanted to watch because I wanted the truth. Now everything had switched sides. What did you do? I finally managed to ask, wondering why it was so hard to speak. But there was something. I heard it. I took another step towards the man. He was retreating in fear. Now setting aside Duke's anger, I was observing the man's every move to find the right answer. I slowly approached him, but something was changing. There was a difference. The fear in the man's eyes was like the darkness before the first light of morning, and that darkness merged with the fear that enveloped me. At that moment, I realized those eyes were as sharp as Duke's gaze. At that moment something broke. The vast emptiness in my heart echoed within me. Fear had seeped into the deepest part of me. My lover, who I once thought created a safe place within me, was now a completely different person. The fear in his eyes was the opposite of everything I had seen before. His eyes seemed to hide the dark shadow over everything. In an instant I realized how small a deception everything I had experienced was. Everything felt like a lie trapping me here. But he knew it too. The feeling inside me was so strong that I didn't know what to do. Even Duke's gaze seemed to say something. When my lover took a step back, my cute dog growled in his direction. I felt something, but understanding what it was became even harder. I started to feel that moment, as if it were just any moment. Yet everything had a huge meaning. The muscles in my jaw tightened, and my eyes met my lover's again. And at that moment I felt stuck in the middle of it all. I moved a step closer, but I was right in the center of the fear in those eyes. Meanwhile, as that river-like feeling pulled me, Duke suddenly moved. Slowly, but surely he began to advance towards my lover. With each step I felt even more fear. Duke was so strong that even his steps slowly forced me to face the truth of everything I looked at him. But then I saw something else. The darkness before dawn was like the fear in the man's eyes. I started to lose myself in everything. Duke stood calmly, but cautiously in front of my lover, as though he had been waiting for this moment. This cute dog, who always made me feel confident, now made me feel something else. The gap between my lover and me, which had never existed before, became starkly apparent because he was so correct and aware. It was just a question of time until my fear became a reality. For a few seconds, my lover didn't say anything. This quiet reverberated into my ears from the walls. Duke's gaze held not just fear but also a threat, and this threat was getting closer with each passing second. At that moment, perhaps the only thing left to do in life was to make the right decision. My lover felt so guilty that he was aware of everything, but I couldn't take another step. Slowly retreating might mean the end of everything. But how could I make a decision describing the fear, anger, and sense of being overwhelmed inside me was beyond words. Maybe it was called inevitability. Without taking my eyes off the man, I was aware of Duke's gaze. On one side, the cute dog was trying to bare his teeth. On the other side, my lover was retreating with fear and guilt in his eyes. But I was now looking towards the future, not the past. The truths were becoming clearer every moment. Neither my lover nor I could escape that moment for a moment. Not knowing what to do, I got lost in that silence, where everything intertwined. That silence slowly began to crumble, and everything gradually turned into a dark shadow. Suddenly the cost of the lie felt like a knife cutting through me. But something was happening. Something was changing, and that change was opening a wound inside me that would never heal again. That if this story resonated with you, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps us craft more engaging stories for you.